guys, Nike here. If you take away anything from this video, it's this. Do not play pure Healbrand. The build is trash, there is no reason to play it, and by using it, you're actively lowering your team's win rate. Now, before you hit the dislike button, that doesn't matter anymore, please hear me out. A pure Healbrand build using Magi or Harrier gear is bad because it only really does one thing. It heals. The boons it reliably produces are regeneration, Aegis, and a little bit of swiftness. And while a well-timed Aegis is a very useful thing, any Firebrand build can do the same, including a pure DPS Firebrand build. And the personal DPS of a Harrier build is totally anemic. Unfortunately, when it comes to putting out just pure heals, the Healbrand is outclassed by several other healers, all of which have significantly more utility. This is incredibly problematic. Why use a non-druid healer that heals for less and also brings less utility? Well, the answer, of course, as I said, you simply shouldn't. It's a horrible build. Now, before you delete your Healbrand, I do have some good news for you. There is a solution, and the solution is Celestial Quickbrand. The Celestial Quickbrand is an acceptable second healer, assuming Druid is your main healer, and brings a significant role compression to your group by the fact that it makes quickness for its subgroup along with Fury, Might, and Regeneration. So in addition to heals and boons, it also does very strong DPS. Unlike your pathetic Healbrand that does 2k damage on most bosses, a Celi Quickbrand can do up to 8 times that. The amount of role compression gained by doing heals, boons, and damage all in one build will drive your team's win rate through the roof. However, there are some downsides. The first downside is that you're forced to use the Quickness Mantra and Liberator's Vow, which means you have a bit less utility available for any encounter-specific skills compared to a pure Healbrand. In most fights, this isn't super relevant, but there are some encounters where you want to bring Shelter, Stability, Aegis, and the Heal Bow, and you simply can't do that with this build. The second downside is that you have to be very active in deciding what to do at any given time. While you're in Tome of Justice, you can't really heal. While you're in Tome of Resolve, you can't do DPS. If you want to maximize your DPS, you need to be on Axe. If you want to heal as much as possible, you need to be camping Mace. What this means is, unfortunately, you have to have a brain. You have to be able to see the situation that your team is in and react to it. You have a true Swiss Army knife at your disposal, but you have to know which tool to use and when. This can be punishing to newer players who don't know precisely how to respond to every encounter, and who may panic when in a high-stress situation and they aren't sure which skills to use. The last downside is that this build has around 1600 toughness, which means that unless you run a very tanky tank, you will be the tank. Now this can be desirable as this is a very capable tank build, but if you aren't comfortable with that, it will obviously be a bad idea. Thankfully, in Fractals or Strike missions, this isn't an issue, and with a little communication, you can be able to resolve this issue in raids in whatever way your group thinks is best. But with that said, this is one of the most powerful team builds in the game. If your group is using a Harrier Healbrand, this is a super upgrade, and your team will instantly notice the overall team improvement, thanks to your own DPS going up, as well as the DPS your team gains through the role compression. So with that said, guys, let's get into the build and talk a little bit more about what we have to offer you today. The gear is very simple. We use Celestial stats in every slot, and in our armor, our rune choice is Superior Rune of the Firebrand. For weapons, we are going to use an axe and a torch with a mace on swap. Malice Sigil and Smoldering will be our sigils, and that will make sure that when we have our food that we get just about to 100% or burning duration. When I do recommend when it comes to food to use red lentil sabozas, and that, as you can see, will get us to 100% boon duration with I've looked at it, and it looks like you need exactly 3 Spiteful infusions to get to 100. If you don't want to bother with the Spiteful infusions, not a big deal to be at 98%. It's not going to be the end of the world for you at all. But I know there are some people who like to min-max, so that is the best way to go ahead and do that. For traits, we take Radiance, Honor, and Firebrand. In Radiance, we select Right Hand Strength, Radiant Fire, and Amplified Wrath. This trait line is essentially pure DPS increase for us, and it is what gives the build the oomph to actually deal quite a bit of damage. In the Honor trait line, by contrast, we're going to get our healing and our utility. We will select Invigorated Bulwark, Empowering Might, and Writ of Persistence. Writ of Persistence is one of the most overpowered traits in the game. It gives us DPS by having our symbols last an extra tick, but it also means more boons too. And lastly, it makes our symbols heal, which, while a small heal, is often quite enough to keep your team topped up if you're not taking massive hits. And as such, it's a nice consistent source of sustain for our team outside of regen and our direct heals. Lastly, it should be noted that Selfless Daring is a rather big heal on your dodge roll. So a double dodge on top of your teammates is a pretty nice burst heal to have in your pocket. In Firebrand, I recommend taking Liberator's Vow, Legendary Lore, and Lore Master. Liberator's Vow is potentially optional if you have an Inspiration Chrono in your comp or a Boon Herald sharing the F2 for the extended boon duration. If you do have one of these, you can skimp a little bit on the quickness and take Archivist of Whispers, which will increase your DPS and your heals by making your tomes way more powerful. For utility skills, Mantra of Solace is unquestionably the best choice always. You can't beat this as a heal. It gives quickness, thanks to our trait. It gives an Aegis, and it heals. You really can't beat it. It's amazing. Next, we're going to take Mantra of Potence, which is where we get most of our quickness uptime from, along with our elite skill, Feel My Wrath. That leaves us with 2 optional slots. For situations where you don't need any special utility and you can just bring straight DPS increases, I recommend taking Signet of Wrath for increased condition damage and Purging Flames for just the biggest, highest DPS skill that's available. With that said, you must swap these 2 optional skills for specific encounters to ensure your team wins. If your team is in a fight where stability will carry the day, you must switch them for Stand Your Ground. It is vitally important. There are times where Aegis is crucially important to the success of your team, and in that case, you must take Advance. Advance also has the side benefit of giving you a very long swiftness application, perma-swiftness, in fact. And that is one thing that this build doesn't do because we are not using staff, so we don't really make any other swiftness. So it should be remembered that those 2 skills are there. And in fact, if you need even more heals, if your team is a bunch of Fidos, you can bring Bow of Truth, which is going to do very well to add some additional heals. And you can use Signet of Mercy if absolutely need be to hard res someone who's down in a bad situation. And remember, in fact, I should also mention, it should be mentioned that we do have Sanctuary, which is a absolutely massive CC skill. But anyway, guys, the point is Firebrand and Guardian, the base kit of Guardian has just massive amounts of utility. And you must switch your utility skills out when it will help your team win. What that means is you have to know what each encounter does. But you might say, well, that's not fair. You're the one making the guide. Tell me what to bring at every fight. I'm not doing that. And the reason is, if you are going to be the healer for your group, you can't just spam your skills. You have to learn the fights and know when to bring what and what to do. It's experience. The more you play, the more you'll learn. What you want to bring for Bone Skinner is going to be different than what you want to bring for Mersat Overseer. So you just have to learn what your team's going to need, and you're going to learn that with experience and by watching other people who play a healing, supporty Firebrand build and seeing what they can bring. Now, as far as gameplay goes, my first bit of advice, and this may seem obvious, is to read all your skills, especially your tome skills, and memorize what each of them does. Again, the amount of utility that you have access at your fingertips with a build like this is simply staggering, and you should always be aware of what options you have to deal with any unexpected situation. With that said, there are some general points that I can make. Tome of Resolve is the healing tome. When you go into Tome of Resolve, the thing that you want to use is always use Eternal Oasis first. Not only does it cleanse conditions, it converts them to boons, which is great. But the important part is it gives a 33% outgoing healing modifier to your allies. Typically speaking, when you go into Tome of Resolve, it's going to be when your team takes big hits. You're not going to just go into Tome of Resolve just to spam skills pointlessly when everyone's at full health. No. You want to go into Tome of Resolve when your team does something foolish and everyone's health is under pressure. This is where you pump the heals. So you will pop Eternal Oasis, then you're going to follow it up with Shining River, which is going to give a nice heal over time AoE, and then lastly, you are going to spam Desert Bloom, and as you'll see, this is enough to pump everyone's health back up to full with ease. But again, remember, this tome is your emergency button. You don't just use it whenever. You can't waste it. This is the tome that's going to save your team's life when they're under pressure, and it's on a 50-second cooldown. So you do have to be aware that you're not going to get too many bites at the apple. You have to use it judiciously. You cannot waste it. For this build, it must be remembered, your main heals are your Sembles, which are going to heal from Writ of Persistence, the regen that you get, that you give out, and your mace auto chains. Those are how you are going to heal people. The tome is for emergency situations when everyone is low and needs rapid healing. Tome of Justice, however, should be used on cooldown. Tome of Justice is your main source of damage. You should use it, like I said, on cooldown. When you go into Tome of Justice, the recommended rotation that I would tell you to do is to use Skill 2, Skill 4, Skill 5, Skill 1, and then Skill 2 again. It should be remembered that Skill 3 is a CC, so as an absolute emergency, you can use it for CC, but it's not the hugest CC in the world, and you're burning a page from the tome. So I wouldn't really advise using it for CC, but you can. As far as our weapon skills go, our priority is making sure that we never delay casting Assemble when it's off cooldown. We want as much Assemble uptime as we possibly can. Additionally, you want to be activating Zealot's Fire as soon as it's available. That is mandatory. Another thing to remember is no matter which weapon you're on, whether it be mace or whether it be axe, our auto attack chains are heavily backloaded. With axe, the third skill, Searing Slash, is where most of the damage comes from. So you do not want to interrupt your auto attack chain once you start it. Additionally, on mace, the third attack, Faithful Strike, is where your healing comes from. So you want to be sure to last through the entire chains once you start them, and do not interrupt them. You can fill in the gaps in your cooldowns on your weapon set with throwing your Zealot's Fire Torch, with using Torch 5, and with using Blazing Edge if you don't need it for CC on your axe. But for the most part, you want to prioritize your symbols, keeping these skills on cooldown, and then completing your auto attack chain. And then obviously using Tome of Justice on cooldown, and then your other tomes as needed for utilities. One on your mace, you want to be trying to proc Protector Strike as much as possible. It does grant your team valuable boons, but it also gives you an outgoing healing modifier, which is very nice. Which means if Protector Strike is off cooldown, and let's say there's a little AoE damage on the ground, you can activate the Protector Strike, walk over to the AoE, and proc it, and it will give the boons out. It will be very nice and give you your block modifier. So you can always intelligently use Protector Strike to benefit your team in a very big way. So yeah, that is it. I know we talked a little bit about food before, and we mentioned that red lentil saboza is the best in slot food for this build. But when it comes to utility, there's a lot of options. If you want more damage, you can bring toxic focusing crystals. However, I recommend, since we're a bit more supporty, to bring toxic maintenance oil, which is going to give us a crap ton of boon duration. And boon duration is the king, and you want to have a lot of it. And you don't really give up that much damage to take this, but I think the benefits outweigh it. You can try both and let me know what you think. All right, that wraps it up. Thank you guys for watching this guide, and I really hope this build helps everyone out. I love playing it, and it's simply fantastic. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts, please leave them below. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And lastly, I want to thank Juan Punch for contributing the raid footage using this build on a variety of bosses. His help and feedback was invaluable for me making this guide. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.